What is going on, guys? My name is John and welcome back to yet another video. Over the past year, I've been challenging myself with the task of catching every single shiny Pokemon in the history of the franchise, and it's fair to say that some Pokemon are a little bit more difficult to get than the rest. To the surprise of no one, mythical Pokemon are seen as the holy grail of any shiny collection, and while I have had a good time getting quite a few of them, a majority of them have never been available. That is, until now. With a few new updates to Pokemon Home, Game Freak has added a bunch of shiny mythical rewards for Pokemon that have never been seen in the mainline games, with the simple requirement of just catching and depositing every Pokemon that's available in a certain game into the live storage. While there are quite a few that I unfortunately already have, a couple of the Generation 5 mythicals are now available, most notably shiny Meloetta for catching every single Pokemon in Scarlet and Violet. Being that my channel is basically focused around doing tasks like this, I knew that I could just instantly redeem the award, so instead I decided to do it again, but with a twist. I caught every single Pokemon that's available before getting a single badge of Pokemon Violet, where somehow you can catch over half of the entire national dex. And this is how it went. Now your first thought is probably, oh no, Peepaw's getting old, he doesn't know he already made this video. But this is a completely different experience. When the game's initially released, I completed a variation of this challenge in Pokemon Scarlet, but with the addition of the DLCs, the amount of areas to reach has not only increased, but so has the variety of Pokemon to catch. Unlike the last time I took this on, this challenge is only going to span across what's required before the first badge rather than the entire game, but considering that there are only 7 extra Pokemon between badges 2 and 18, I figured there wasn't really too much reason to show that. Just like any other playthrough, our journey begins at our house where we get to pick our first Pokemon, and while normally this choice is given to my Twitch chat, for some reason, one of them stood out a little bit more than the rest. Oh my god, he's levitating! Somebody save him! He's gonna take off!
Is it actually? Oh my god, it is. It literally is floating. Wow.
And we just started. With this added to our team, we've obtained our first member, and I made my way through the initial catching tutorial with Nemona, which begins our daunting journey across the region. After taking care of the events with Miraidon, we went through the initial storyline leading up to entering Mesagoza, where we're immediately thrown towards an absurd list of Pokemon. So many that you could easily register 50 Pokemon before even stepping into the city. Because we're currently a little limited on our resources, I tried to catch anything new that I could find, and managed to obtain 20 Pokemon before our battle with Nemona, and upon entering the city, I decided to customize my character a bit, where I think it's fair to say our options are limited.
I either got unbelievably sunburned or I am morphing, anamorphing into a human carrot. All right, well, I guess I'm a carrot. Call me Carrot Boy.
From here, we meet some members of Team Star and have our first ever evolution with Spupa, and while this may seem like a new member added to the total, it's important to note to make this journey a little bit harder, this entire challenge is going to be done as a living dex, which basically means that instead of evolving Pokemon like Scatterbug to get all the dex entries, I'm going to need to get every individual Pokemon in that line before I can say that I've truly caught them all. With the introduction to the Academy done, I was able to begin the 3 main quests in the storyline for Victory Road, Path of Legends, and Starfall Street, which essentially unlocks the entirety of Paldea for us to venture through to our heart's content. Now, in previous Professor Oak challenges that I've done, this is where you start grinding before the first badge. But I think in this game, it's fair to question what's considered a badge. While there are 8 gyms in this game, I personally feel like each of the 18 challenges that you have to complete is considered as a badge, which means that unfortunately we're going to have a lot of limitations in how we can interact with everything in Paldea. Which brings us to point out the most glaring situation we have, dealing with Miraidon. While having the upgrade to ride this Pokemon is a whole lot better than all the walking we did earlier, this is not much better. Because all the ride upgrades are tied to the Titan battles, we can't boost, climb, glide, or even jump high for the entirety of this challenge, which is a huge pain for the first objective in my game plan to complete all of this. Thankfully, because this game has fast travel, I figured the best thing to immediately get out of the way was to visit every single fly location in Paldea. While the first trip through the map is going to be painfully slow, being able to jump from place to place in this challenge will cut down a tremendous amount of time in the long run, and also helps with a few important side quests that are necessary to complete this adventure.
Oh, right. I hear it. One of, unfortunately, 1,000. So that's gonna be really fun.
While the tiny ones don't count as a dex entry, in most of the fast travel towers that we have to visit, you can encounter the chest form Gimme Ghoul, which also gives between 50 to 80 coins on the first time that you defeat them. So if I manage to encounter all the ones that are available on the map, I should be able to get this done significantly faster than last time. As I started my way up the west side of the region, I began encountering the next big hurdle that we need to address, and one that unfortunately is the core of this entire challenge. Just catching Pokemon. Now, a lot of you probably think that this issue is the fact that I don't have money, and that's something that can be easily fixed later on. The real problem is that without any badges, the game tries to set a hard limit as to what Pokemon you can catch. Currently with 0 badges, the game has an obedience level set for my Pokemon, where if I catch a Pokemon at level 12 or above, it will refuse to do what I ask it to do. And while this is a great mechanic to make the game open world while preventing you from becoming wildly overleveled, it also affects the catching process. This mechanic affects the catch rate starting at level 2, and considering that I caught the first Gimme Ghoul in 2 balls, and this one took 10, probably gives a good idea as to how the rest of this dex is going to go. Thankfully, this metric stops at level 20, but this makes the catch rate go down by 60% for any Pokemon, which is basically anything that's in the northern half of the map. Regardless, I slowly chugged my way up to the top of the region, where I noticed that quite a few fly spots were just not accessible, either from height requirements or story reasons, but thankfully, in a lot of these cases, there was another one nearby where it wasn't a major inconvenience. After nearly 3 hours of gameplay under my belt, I had successfully made it to the peak of Glaciato Mountain and unlocked every single fly area on the map. So now all we have to do is just catch everything, right? Well, not exactly. As I mentioned before, Scarlet and Violet had DLC available post-release, and to the surprise of no one, these are going to be the source of the dramatic difference in Pokedex totals compared to the first time that I took it on. While Game Freak makes it clear that the first DLC is accessible before you beat the game, they make it very clear that you need to beat the entire game to experience both expansions, which begs the question, how far can we take this? By heading back to Uva Academy, we can talk to Briar and begin our quest into the land of Kitakami, which begins the first DLC of the Teal Mask. Now, if you played this expansion before, odds are that you took it on after completing the main storyline, but this DLC is not only accessible at any point in the story, but it's actually encouraged to explore by including level scaling for the trainers and the wild Pokemon. While this does make things like required battles a lot easier, it also removes a lot of the issues that we have with Gimme Ghoul by keeping the encounters between level 10 to 20. As you can imagine by looking at the region, basically everywhere is accessible. A few rivers separate some portions of the map, but by climbing to the top of Oni Mountain, we can essentially ride down in any direction and easily traverse the entire area. Just like Paldea, I decided that it'd be best to unlock the short list of fly points in this area, and thankfully this only took about 45 minutes before I could officially say that I had the entire challenge at my fingertips. But that wasn't entirely true. Another common piece of knowledge about these games is that the second DLC pack that was added to Gen 9 was seen as the giant post-game expansion, similar to the Crown Tundra in Pokemon Sword and Shield. Upon the release of this update, the Pokemon Company made it clear that you couldn't play through the Indigo Disc until you completed the entire main story of the game, but what if I told you that wasn't completely true? Upon visiting Uva Academy after completing the intro to the Teal Mask, you can have a quick conversation with Serrano, and after a few dialogue options, the game will just begin the storyline to the Indigo Disc. Obviously, they wanted you to at least know that this area exists, but I decided to test the limits to see truly how far we could take this challenge.
Listen, we took on Kieran, we took on Carmine. I think we're gonna be fine. If we can beat those two people, what's the worry, you know? That may be a small obstacle to get through.
Now, while I could definitely spend a solid 30 hours grinding up my team to take on this duo, this begins the very peculiar list of exceptions that they threw into this DLC, which completely changes the challenge. Despite being basically 55 levels under level for this fight, the storyline will continue regardless if you win or lose, which to some of you, it raises a very strange question. How does that work with the story? See, at the end of the Teal Mask story, you watch as Kieran's personality transforms into what seems to be like a villain story arc, and after this battle with Lacey, we dive into that. But how would that work if we technically don't know that information yet? I decided to push forward to find out more, which somehow leads us directly inside of the terrarium. If you know anything about this DLC, all 4 sections of the terrarium connect to each other, which means that with a little bit of traversing, we can at minimum reach every single biome without having a single badge. As you can imagine, this drastically increases the amount of Pokemon that we now need to catch, but there is one small problem. Everything is level 60. Depending on how you look at it, this is a double-edged sword. While this does essentially make it so whatever you catch here will instantly evolve upon level up, everything here is nearly impossible to catch, especially when my current team can't even survive a single tackle. On the surface, this seems like way too difficult of a task, and if I'm being transparent, I've attempted this challenge before and completely dropped it at this point due to the grind being too long. But after looking a few things over, there are some important things I didn't consider. Let's start with the largest issue, catching new Pokemon. Currently in Paldea, we can only buy Pokeballs, and as I mentioned before, that's a bit of a problem with catching over-leveled Pokemon. However, if we visit any of the vending machines within the terrarium, we now have access to every ball that's normally for purchase in the post-game, so with the usual strategy of quick balling turn 1 and using repeat balls on duplicate catches will drastically decrease the amount of time spent on this challenge. But this brings us to the next question we have to address. How in the world are we going to afford buying these? Well, there are plenty of items that can be picked up as we traverse the terrarium. I also do have a ton of TMs and valuables that I found while I was exploring the fly points, so believe it or not, there really won't be any moments where we'll be struggling to get our cash together. After preparing a bit, I started working on visiting all the final fly points in this challenge, which in my opinion contains some of the hardest ones to visit in this game. While each quadrant does contain bridges that connect to each area, climbing to some areas like the mountainsides and caverns require a ton of trial and error, which can be a little annoying, especially when you have extremely busted Pokemon tracking you down the entire time. While this would normally be a huge issue getting into battles with these Pokemon, Pokemon, thankfully there's a feature in the more modern Pokemon games where ghost types are guaranteed to run away from any encounter, so with Gimmighoul in my lead, my only worry was just making my way through the map. After only about 20 minutes of jumping around, I managed to unlock every single location in the terrarium, with the exception of one fly point in the middle of the polar biome, which won't be a problem since nearly all of the water spawns are in the same area. With basically the entire game at my fingertips, I was finally ready to actually begin the grinding part of this challenge, but there was one more thing that I knew that was essential to completing this challenge. In the coastal biome, we can meet up with Lacey again to begin the quest of catching an alolan Pokemon, which introduces you to the concept of the blueberry quests. By completing small tasks like catching a certain type of Pokemon, picking up items, and crafting TMs, you can earn BP, which can be exchanged at the League Club for upgrades to your character, as well as the terrarium. The most notable thing you can buy from this are the field upgrades, which allow the starter Pokemon to spawn all over the biomes, which would add yet another huge pool of Pokemon that we need to collect. However, there is one issue.
So after completing that, we get a notification that says, you aren't quite ready to progress further in the adventure awaiting you at Blueberry Academy. To do so, you have to first complete your main adventure in the Paldea region by completing the professor's last task, as well as conclude the assignment you were given during your school trip to the land of Kitakami. However, that doesn't mean that you can't just keep playing.
I figured the next best play would be to try to evolve some of my terrarium catches to make a more defensive team, but after struggling to knock out a single execute for 10 minutes, I knew that I was probably going to have to rethink my strategy. And thankfully, I knew just the Pokemon. In any sort of Pokedex challenge, the most important member of your team is one that can also catch Pokemon. And while there aren't really any good resources in the DLC to help with that, Paldea is loaded with them. I decided to go with the tried and true method of getting a Breloom, which in theory would be perfect with False Swipe and Spore, but there is one glaring issue. Will the level cap make it disobey? And while in older games, overlevel Pokemon won't consistently listen to you, as long as you catch the Pokemon under the level cap in this game, it will obey you regardless of what level you train it up to. During the process of collecting items on my journey, I managed to get enough experience candies to instantly evolve Shroomish, but as you would imagine, level 36 was definitely not going to cut it. As if the level cap wasn't limiting enough, the experience you earn in-game scales depending on the user's level, meaning that the higher that we get, the less XP that we'll earn. And while I can go through the process of taking on some of the more weak members of the terrarium, there is one strategy that we can take advantage of that most people don't even know exists in these games. Now, you might have realized that it's clear that the blueberry points that you can farm are pretty much useless with adding Pokemon to the total, considering that we're restricted from visiting the League Club due to interfering with Kieran's storyline, but that doesn't mean they aren't worth grinding for. If you head back to the entrance of Blueberry Academy, you can visit the school store. This is a location where you can get important evolution items and tools for EV training, but partway down, you can use those points to buy experience candies. While you can buy rare candies for 100 BP, using 2 large experience candies will basically evolve most Pokemon around level 60, so redeeming as many of these as possible will be the fastest solution towards getting through this entire challenge. If you know anything about farming BP, having a cost of 35 per candy is wildly cheap, as that's basically the equivalent of completing 2 very basic barbecue quests. So I made the goal for the rest of the day to not only farm as many as I could, but to also increase the Pokedex total. It's important to note that as you go along completing requests, you'll receive a bonus quest for completing 10 of them, and these give a much larger reward for essentially a task of the same difficulty. The only true downside to farming these is that you can only work on them while you're inside of the terrarium, so I did my best to try and catch some more easy Pokemon in the DLC, all while completing any task that was thrown my way. After about 30 minutes of grinding, I managed to earn around 500 BP, and I was able to instantly bring Breloom up to level 60, and at this point, I knew the plan was starting to really come together. Oh, I'm gone. No way.
Luigi has plot armor. This is not how you're gonna go out. Oh my god, he goes out on his own terms. That's so sick.
After about an hour more of catching Pokemon, I'd obtained a 10th of the entire Pokedex and realized that I really set myself up perfectly for the rest of this challenge.
We ended up accessing every location that we can go to, with the exception of this one right here, which doesn't change spawns, so it doesn't even matter. The general Paldea area, we've accessed everything. There's like one spot here and one spot here that we just didn't fly to because there's really no need. Kitakami, we went everywhere except Fellhorn Gorge, which is also fine. Honestly, for most challenges, that is as much as you can ask for. You know?
The following day, I immediately jumped into continuing the challenge, and I really only had 2 goals in mind: adding 100 new entries to the Pokedex, as well as grinding as much BP as I possibly could by the end of the day. Because I could partially get both of these tasks done at the same time, I decided to begin in the terrarium by catching some of the more difficult Pokemon that I avoided the day prior, and as you'd expect, even with Pokeballs, not many Pokemon were very kind. After an hour of roaming around, I only obtained a few new encounters, encounters, but I did end up farming quite a bit of BP, especially from catching requirements like completing Terra raids. At this point, it had been a little over 24 hours since I'd started the challenge, so I figured it'd be worth my time to not only revisit all of the Gimme Ghoul watchtowers, but also visit every chest in the region and try to make a big dent in arguably one of the hardest evolutions in the entire challenge. While most of the previous locations hadn't respawned yet due to them having a 5% respawn chance per in-game day, I managed to get some pretty good yields from the remaining initial spawns and collected over 700 coins with basically zero effort put in. Back in the terrarium, I made my way through the canyon biome finding more entries, and I finally evolved my starter into Meowscarada, which is probably the only good thing that came from this hour of gameplay. While there were occasional moments where some Pokemon were a little bit more kind with getting in the ball, after spending over 15 minutes to catch a single Rotom, I realized that my goals today were probably not going to be seen if I spent all of my time in this area, so I made my way back to the southern half of Paldea to survey every location until I had quite literally everything that could spawn there. Immediately, I could tell this was a smart play considering that this time around, I had every ball at my disposal, so nearly every catch took a maximum of 3 balls to get, with a majority of them caught within the first quick ball. I quickly made my way through the south province of the map, to the eastern flatlands, and slowly climbed to the top of Glaciato Mountain, catching everything in sight. After about 2 hours of traversing through the map, I managed to reach my first goal of collecting 150 Pokemon in the dex, but I definitely wasn't done with the day.
150 Pokemon. All done with that requirement today, and so the rest of today, which is another about an hour and a half, we are going to lock in and get as many blueberry points as we possibly can.
By this point, I had a little under 2,000 BP to put towards the Experience Candy Fund, but with a little bit more time put towards grinding for the day, I knew that it would make all the difference. While I did manage to catch a few more Pokemon in this time, a lot of the tasks that were assigned were mostly related to taking photos and washing baby, and after a little over an hour, I managed to reach over double the BP that I had farmed on day 1, and I knew that I was set up to really start taking on some of the more tedious parts of the challenge. Now, at this point, I unlocked nearly everything available on the map. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm done with exploring in the game. Although I'm not able to progress further in Paldea or the Terrarium, Kitakami is a completely different story. As I mentioned before, the developers intended for this entire DLC to be explorable no matter what point you're at in the story. But shockingly, this also applies to the legendaries that you can find within it. Our main goal for this day was to play through the entirety of the Teal Mask storyline to catch Ogerpon, which if you play this, it isn't too hard of a task, but this is also a good excuse to try and obtain an overwhelming majority of the Pokemon that are exclusive to this area. Throughout the storyline, there are a few little side quests that the game forces you to participate in, with the most important being Ogre Ousting, and after completing the demo, we do unlock the Experience Charm to speed up our ability to level up, but as you can imagine, this really isn't going to be too much of a help compared to our BP game plan. After progressing a little bit further into the story, we're able to meet the Loyal 3, and had to work on taking them down to finish up one of the final events for the storyline, but some of the members were a little bit different than I remember them being.
Monkey. No, that's the wrong monkey. You are not Monkey Dory. Maybe you are. Maybe you are the right monkey.
After only 2 hours of gaming, I managed to reach the climax of the story, which brings us to the events with fighting Kieran to prove our worth to catch Ogerpon. And although Luigi was nearly double the level of his team, that doesn't mean that we didn't have our complications. With Ogerpon quickly defeated, I had not only added another Pokemon to the total, but completed essentially every required storyline aspect that we need for the rest of this challenge. Which is a good thing because we can now focus entirely on the challenge, and it's also bad because we nearly have 400 Pokemon left to catch. After quickly going back to the terrarium to get more balls, I worked my way around Kitakami catching everything that I needed, and this felt like a major break compared to the previous days with how easily I was able to catch everything. But there were still a few here that some might say are impossible to get.
Kabuto. That's a rock.
I started clearing out everything available at the Mossfell confluence, made my way through the southern areas of the map, and traveled to the west side of the region past Apple Fields to continue building our total. It's important to note by this point, I'd started to throw some new Pokemon into my party to help gain them a little bit of passive experience while I'm working on filling the gaps in the Pokedex. And while I probably should have started working on this process as soon as I started, the yields were obviously pretty bad, but I did manage to knock out a few more evolutions by the time I reached a whopping 200 Pokemon in the Dex. With another big milestone achieved, I figured it was time to spice things up and add a couple of special encounters, and since we're done with the DLC story, I figured it'd be a good idea to revisit the Loyal 3.
I mean, like, it is, you know, a 3 catch rate, but I don't think that this is really gonna be that hard, you know? Oh, right.
After making my way through the Paradise Barrens and the Timeless Woods, I found myself scaling the spiral leading to the top of Oni Mountain, and I obtained yet another 50 Pokemon as I had reached the Crystal Pool, a location that contains an encounter that's going to be a lot harder to obtain than I had initially thought. To the people who have played the DLC before, it's probably not a surprise that you can traverse down through the core of the mountain, which contains a small selection of new Pokemon to obtain throughout all of the tunnels. While a majority of these Pokemon can be found in other areas of the game, in the deepest section you have a rare chance of encountering Feebas, by far the rarest Pokemon available in this entire expansion. While finding an outbreak here is nearly impossible, just seeing the Pokemon is also considered a small feat. While I was able to descend into the main part of the cavern to access the pool area, I may have forgot there's a 100-foot cliff that leads to Feebas's home, which may have thrown a small wrench in the plans.
Now hold on, everybody. I have an idea. Okay, maybe that wasn't a good idea. I mean, I can't imagine any other way to get in that. Wait, was that a Feebas? Editors enhance. With a hypothetical, can I land on a Pokemon? Can I land on a Pokemon and get an encounter? So, fun feature, if you fall too many times, just bring you back to the beginning of the game.
I figured that I'd worry about taking this on at another time and focus on the most glaring part of the challenge. I'm almost halfway done. Because I'd done a clean sweep at Kitakami, I made my way back to Paldea to catch a few random Pokemon, and after a cool 20 minutes, I could say that I caught 264 Pokemon without any badges, but we're still far away from getting to the final grind. That evening, I decided it might be worth trying to cut down the stream grind, and I worked on farming a little bit more BP before I went off to bed. In the span of an hour, I managed to nearly double to 6,000 BP with pretty minimal effort, and I even found some new encounters along the way.
Oh, I found a shiny. He's the little baby. That's so weird because I was like, if I'm gonna find anything here, it's probably gonna be a Mincino. Look at him. I don't even think I have this one either, which is even more wild. Matt, you wanted to name this one clearly, so what name would you like to give it?
Oh no, now I have the burden of this? Okay, hold on.
It's crazy.
XX Clarence XX.
That goes hard.
For the next few days, my goal was set to catch every remaining Pokemon that I glossed over during my initial walk through all 3 of the maps, as well as try my best to set up with as many blueberry points as possible to make the final grind as seamless as I possibly could make it. Because I ended the previous day in Paldea, I decided to start off there and begin working through my spreadsheet trying to find anything that I didn't have checked off, but this also led me to encountering some more rare Pokemon that I passed by along the way.
Where is Pikachu?
Oh!
Where are you going? Okay, I need you, but I really wanted that.
While a majority of these species that I need to find were new, this was still my best opportunity to catch all the duplicates that I wanted to fill out for my living decks. So despite having half of the entire decks in my PC, nearly everything that I was seeing at this point was still on the table. As I made my way closer to the west side of the region, I realized that an unfortunately large amount of spawns that were unchecked resided in the Paldean Ocean, and although most of these are within throwing distance, there were some Pokemon that were laughably annoying to encounter like Shelder, which took a whopping 10 minutes for me to track down in battle. But this did also give me the opportunity to experience the beauty of this aquatic environment. What? Where in the world in this entire map could you have possibly come from? Bro is a jet ski. After clearing out more of that area, I realized that while a majority of the evolutions that I needed to obtain in this challenge are either through level up or by using an item, I've completely neglected the lengthy list of friendship Pokemon that need to be obtained. Fortunately, a majority of these Pokemon are actually wild spawns in this game, but for some of the more difficult ones like Umbreon, I figured they'd be smart to grab those and immediately put them in my party to avoid any later complications.
Go behind Medali. What is that? I don't think that's in the Pokedex, I'm gonna be honest with you. Gotta respect it. Gotta respect it. Wait, is it guiding me to Eevee? Maybe that's what it is. The prophecy. The shopping bag helped us.
After obtaining basically everything in the area surrounding Castle Royale Lake, I started to scale Glaseado Mountain to obtain some of the extremely limited spawns that I missed, like Spiritomb and the Frigibax line. And after about 5 hours of traversing through the map, I was able to add another 70 new entries to the Pokedex, as well as fill out all the gaps in my living decks for the base game Pokedex. For day 5 of the challenge, I had a shorter stream planned, and I figured that there was no better time than now to take care of the remaining encounters that I needed to tackle in the terrarium, which went exactly how you think it went. Once again, most of these Pokemon took a few minutes apiece, which really adds up over the course of the stream, but I definitely had quite a few ways to break up the stream to make it feel not as monotonous as the previous days. Because by this point there were at least 30 in-game days that have passed since I began this challenge, I decided to once again check all the Gimmighoul locations, and nearly every location that had respawned with a new encounter. After defeating a few, I was able to reach a total of 999 coins, and evolve one of the first catches in this challenge into Golden Go, and finally check off the most difficult Pokemon in this entire challenge. With another 3 hours of catching under my belt, I tracked down a large chunk of Pokemon that I needed in the terrarium, and brought my total up to another 50 entries, and while I was done with the stream, that didn't mean that I was done with the challenge for the day. If you remember from earlier, I never actually got my grubby little gamer hands on a Feebas, and I wasn't entirely sure how I was going to pull that off, especially when there was no way I could access the pool without obtaining the badge to swim. Eventually I did find a method, but as you'd expect, it's not exactly convenient. Throughout all Scarlet and Violet, the only other way to obtain Feebas is through the Terra dens that are scattered across Kitakami, and I spent the evening checking every single one that's available. Keep in mind the Feebas is only available in the 2-star dens, which at this point in the game are really uncommon without any badges, and to top it all off, there is a 1 in 16 chance that Feebas will be in one of them. So needless to say, the odds are definitely not in my favor. On the upside, I am able to reroll the dens by changing the date on my Switch, but that doesn't fix the fact that I'll maybe only see a few 2-star dens at a time, and with limited movement options, a majority of these are a chore to reach. So with a long night ahead of me, I strapped in and started checking every den that I could reach, fast traveling to any locations that were far away, just clinging to the small chance that maybe. It was in yesterday's raid rotation, didn't check any of the dens on stream. It was right where I'm standing. It was like the second to last raid that I checked. It just happened to be there, which is good, but it's not good content. So if you want to just react right now like we got it, oh, there it is! Surely they'll believe that. With the actual hardest Pokemon to get in the challenge added to the total, I was adamant about not ending stream today until I had every single Pokemon captured from my living dex. During this process, I was reminded of a few additional quests that I needed to go on, like grabbing special items like the Syrupy Apple for later evolutions, where I learned that I only needed one of these, as Hydrapple is actually locked behind the Terrarium storyline, as you get the TM it needs to evolve after completing one of the gym trials. As I crept closer to the 400 Pokedex mark, it was very clear that I was bothered with missing out on good content with finding Feebas on stream, but it was clear that the game wanted to compensate for that. I'm so upset that I did not get it on stream. I did record me getting it, but that does suck so hard that you guys did not get to see it. Because I think I went through 4 dens before it showed up, which is that usually. Oh! At what point were you on the screen? That's a really sick shiny too! A full odds shiny Mienfoo. Wow. Destined to be. That's nuts. With another lap taken around Kitakami, I figured now might be the best time to check out another very important side quest in these games. In Masui Town, we can meet Perrin and her Growlithe, who will offer us a special side quest to unlock Ursaluna if we've completed enough of the Kitakami Pokedex. Believe it or not, despite not being able to obtain everything in this challenge, we're actually able to crack the 150 Pokemon requirement due to some Paldean Pokemon carrying over to this Pokedex. So with only 2 Pokemon left to reach that, I evolved my shiny Mienfoo, redeemed all of my blueberry points for almost 180 large candies, and then used some to evolve a random Piloswine, setting me up to head to the forest to take on the Blood Moon Beast. With a few woodland pictures taken, I was able to fight Ursaluna, and while this is easily one of the strongest wild Pokemon in the entire game, it didn't take too long to take it down and add to the collection, which checked off the final Pokemon that I needed to catch throughout all of Kitakami. With only one region left to deal with, I quickly caught all of the remaining 20-ish encounters that were left in the terrarium, and after 40 hours of gameplay, I could officially say that I was ready for the final grind of the challenge. We have caught every single Pokemon. This is our total is 415. We've caught everything across Paldea and both of the DLCs. Except for one. Now, while the goal for this challenge was to have a fun gateway into getting Shiny Meloetta to begin my Gen 5 Shiny Dex, this isn't our only opportunity to get one. Over the past few years, Game Freak has tried to implement more mythicals into the main series titles, and Scarlet and Violet is no exception. By completing a certain sequence of events, you can obtain a regular Meloetta at any point in the Scarlet and Violet story, but the process of doing that is nothing short of a playground rumor. Well, as you can see, there are leaves, which is a clear indicator that something big is here. And so what you need to do, this is not a troll, chat, you need to spin. You bring out the camera, and you change the filter to sepia. This is not real. This is, who figured this out? Meloetta. The whole reason we're doing this, except this one sucks. It's not as cool. Sorry. Now, as you'd expect, this thing was not fun to catch at all. With the lowest catch rate in the entire game, it was expected that this was going to take quite a few attempts, but nothing prepared me for just how long this entire side quest was going to take.
I have a joke for you, John. Fiddy.
I don't like that joke. Type 1 if you're a positive chatter. Where are my positive chatters at?
Positivity, I'm positive that you better get over here for our battle. Egg boy, you better not be doing schoolyard tricks to find mythical monsters. I've been waiting here for weeks.
Hey, Johnstone. Just thought I'd call and warn you that there seems to be some extremely angry pirate girl hanging out in front of my gym. By the way, this is Brassius, since this TTS voice bit hasn't been established yet.
Of course, of course. Does anyone else want to come interrupt me in this battle?
Yes, John. Just coming here to say, 6 months here. That's it.
Nice.
Also, balls.
Thank you. That was my out, was a crit capture like 40 minutes later. Wow. Holy, that was such a long time. That is without a doubt the hardest Pokemon I've ever had to catch. And the worst part is it wasn't even part of the Pokedex.
With this done, I'd actually caught every single Pokemon in the terrarium that I needed to complete the dex, but there was one more Pokemon that we still needed to redeem. In Kitakami, we can talk to Jacques and receive an egg from his picnic, which results in us getting a random Sinnoh starter, which does in fact count as a Pokedex entry. Because we still can't do any of the terrarium expansions, we're unable to obtain the other 2 lines. But I did end up hatching the best starter out of the 3, and conveniently the easiest one to evolve as well. With this, I was completely ready to begin the final big grind for the Pokedex, but I wanted to save that for tomorrow. But I also still wanted to stream more, so I decided that 2 shinies weren't enough for this challenge and wanted to really push myself and go for something special. While shiny Mienshao and Clarence were neat to find, I wanted to leave this challenge with a shiny pseudo Pokemon, and I knew just a location to go to. In the northeasternmost section of Paldea, we can visit a location that's home to quite a few Dragon-type Pokemon that would fit this category, and I felt that a shiny Dratini would be the perfect finale to this day. Now keep in mind, while I am using a Dragon-type sandwich to boost my spawn chances, I'm hunting this at full odds, as there isn't a super convenient way to get Herba Mystica at this point in the story, so I was hunting at the base 1 in 4,096 odds, which obviously isn't great, but with the amount of Pokemon in this area, I knew that something would eventually show up. With Pokemon like Dragapult, Vaporeon, and Altaria in the area, I knew that I had potential to find something really good, and I ended up finding something way sooner than I expected.
Oh! Oh! We found it! Wow! What a horrible angle, I'll know, but we did find it. This has to be under odds, and it's the thing we wanted. This is the first sandwich, and this is full odds. This is 1 in 4,096. That is actually nuts. Oh, we've done it. A shiny that I have not gotten in a very long time, and super under odds. After evolving to get Dragonite, I'd successfully ended the day with 416 Pokemon in the dex, which meant that tomorrow began the final big grind. With the 1 week mark of this challenge upon us, I had a pretty optimistic feeling that I was going to get everything taken care of today, but with 100 more Pokemon that still need to be registered in the Pokedex, I knew this final grind was going to be anything but a walk in the park. I began the day with hatching all the duplicate Pokemon that I needed, which thankfully with an egg power sandwich didn't take too long, and with this we were able to obtain a few more unobtainable wild spawns, but additionally hatched some very difficult Pokemon to catch like Beldum, which saved us from having to have another Meloetta episode. After about 30 minutes I was ready to begin evolving everything, and I figured that the best play of action would be to take on everything in order of the Paldea Pokedex. While the first few were pretty easy because of a few items, there were quite a few that I still hadn't picked up, so I chugged my way through the northern section of the map to try and pick up everything that I needed, with the most difficult one being the Sunstone, which took about 15 minutes to just get 1 in the Asado Desert. Considering that I needed 4 to complete the challenge, I figured that the fastest way to get this done would be to just catch all of those in the wild when they come up in the Pokedex, and looking back, for these rare evolution methods, this was definitely the easiest way to get this sorted. As I mentioned earlier, basically every Pokemon evolved in 1 or 2 levels, and a majority of the stream was just watching the fruits of our labor come to completion. It's just that 100 evolutions takes a lot more time than you think. After about 2 hours of grinding, I managed to evolve about 40 new Pokemon, which led to the grind of taking care of some of the more unique evolutions on our list. For Palmot and Bramblegas, I had to walk them for 1,000 uninterrupted steps with the Let's Go feature, and after spending about 10 minutes just getting the first one, I figured that heading back to Castle Royale Lake to catch the other one was once again a smarter decision, which I planned on going there anyways to get a few more evolution items, as well as potentially a new encounter that could just cut down more of the time. Apparently it's up there. Well, hey! Wait a second. No! You took so long to show up. I refuse to nonchalantly walk into Castle Royale Lake and you're just here. Don't even play this scenario like, oh, well, you caught me. That is ridiculous.
After doing some combat-based evolutions for Annihilate and King Gambit, I was able to complete the Paldea side of the challenge with 472 Pokemon in the dex, and immediately moved to taking on the DLC spawns. After another hour of easy evolutions, I'd successfully reached an almost unfathomable amount of 500 Pokemon, which led to a small little detour that I completely forgot about. Archelodon is one of the very few new Pokemon added to the Indigo Disc DLC, and unlike the situation with Hydrapple, this Pokemon is completely obtainable. The only issue is that you can only redeem its evolution item with BP, and I've already spent everything that I farmed. So after spending some time taking more photos and definitely not fueling my addictions, I was able to grab that evolution and continue down the very few remaining on my list, where I realized that I just barely underestimated how many candies I needed, so I extended my grind a little bit further to get another 500 BP. With a few more evolutions and 1 wild Dusclops that I completely forgot to grab in my possession, I took on the grind of evolving to get Basculegion and completed 1 important trait at Levincia to get Gengar, which brings the total to 526 out of the 529 Pokemon I need for this challenge. So who were the final 3? 3. Oh, we really don't have to. Like, you guys wouldn't really care, right? We can just skip all. Now you're probably thinking that I chose to hold these off for the end for a big dramatic finale, and then finally take them on when I had a really solid team thrown together. Nope. I actually just forgot about them. Despite the Loyal 3 having the same catch rate as Malouetta, it took nearly the same amount of time to get all of these, which just puts into perspective how disrespectful that thing really was. But with a couple timer balls, I could officially say that I had completed my entire list.
We've done it! And with that, chat, we have successfully caught every single Pokemon before the first badge. I actually lied. I lied to you guys. There's 2 more. Within the main story Paldea, you can collect assorted colored stakes in the ground, and after pulling each one, you can unlock an interaction with a legendary Pokemon. Now it's important to note that due to some being way too high in the air or stranded in the middle of Castleroyal Lake, there are 2 that are just outright unobtainable. However, the other 2 are an interesting scenario. While normally we don't have the resources to obtain the other 2, with a small exploit in the game of jumping backwards, we can effectively cancel out our jump animations and scale unclimbable areas like the mountain goat we've always dreamed of being. Well, normally I'm against doing things like these in the challenge. I didn't use this during the entirety of the 55-hour adventure that we just went on, and I figured that if I really wanted to catch everything that was available, I would do anything I could to make it happen. I managed to pull all of the stakes within an hour of moving through the map, and after quickly catching Wo-Chan, I made my way to challenge the final member holding me back from my big goal. Welcome, Chad, to the final battle. 1 regular ball. I will throw 1 premier ball. There's no way. And with that, chat, we have successfully caught every single Pokemon before the first badge, all 531 Pokemon, and we now get the beautiful reward we worked so hard for. It's time for Malouetta! I can't wait. It's been like, what, a week and a half, 2 weeks? No. That's actually so stupid.